Hello, my name is Erin Taylor, and I'm the Senior Vice President of Programs at the Climate Reality Project. I'd like to welcome you to this year's 24 Hours of Reality and our fourth global dialogue today, exploring how we can build inclusive green communities around the globe. This year, 24 Hours of Reality, Spotlight on Solutions and Hope, highlights the incredible progress people of all ages and walks of life are making in our fight to stop rising temperatures and build a healthy and sustainable future together. As you've seen with the previous dialogues today, this is a day to share stories and ideas, to learn what is working and how we can all make a difference, to find hope and inspiration, and then get to work in our own communities. This global dialogue is a chance for advocates who are building green communities across the planet to connect and share their perspectives. Our hope is that by learning from each other, we can build a stronger movement together, a movement that is needed to win. We are lucky to have an amazing panel of activists with us today. But before I introduce them, I just want to share that the audience can ask any questions you may have for the panelists by clicking the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. And we will be asking a few of these questions later in the broadcast. So first, I'd like to welcome Isadora Gran, the Engagement and Climate Justice Coordinator of Climate Reality Project Brazil. Isadora has a degree in social work and studies gender, human rights, and vulnerable territories. Welcome, Isadora. We're also joined by Aditya Pandir, Director of the Climate Project Foundation for India and South Asia. He has worked extensively in the field of climate change and sustainability in India. And our final panelist is Matt Baums, the Director of the Road to Carbon Neutral Project, which is an initiative run by OPA and Climate Reality to implement new projects and narratives in Colombia's transport and energy sectors that will help the country to reach its goal of net zero emissions by 2050. So welcome to all of you. And now to get us going, I'm honored to introduce our moderator, Climate Reality's founder and chairman, and former Vice President of the United States, Mr. Al Gore.
Well, thank you so much, Erin. And for those who have tuned in throughout the day, welcome back to our final global dialogue of this year's 24 Hours of Reality event, Spotlight on Solutions and Hope. Today, we've been highlighting the work that climate activists at the grassroots level from all around the world are doing in their own communities to create real change and generate momentum to implement solutions, the solutions that we have available to us today that will help us tackle the climate crisis. So this session will focus on how we can work together to build green communities. This work has grown incredibly urgent as the impacts of the climate crisis have obviously grown steadily more severe. Our homes, businesses, and critical infrastructure are all at risk. But with smart planning to increase the resilience of our buildings and neighborhoods, as well as with efforts to reduce emissions and green our communities, we can create and help families save money, create jobs, and deliver a better future for the next generation. So the three climate activists that are joining us today on this fourth panel are each contributing to efforts to create green communities in their region. So I want to jump right into our conversation, and I'd like to start off by hearing a bit more from each one of you about the work that you're doing, but not only what you're doing, why you're doing it. Why is creating an inclusive green community important to your area? And Isadora, why don't you start things off for us?
Thank you, sir. So I'm here representing the Climate Rights Letter of Mare. That is a project to understand. Maré is a complex of 16 favelas in the north zone of Rio de Janeiro. And what we are doing is understanding with all the people that live there and work there, what are the main impacts that are being felt in terms of climate impacts, and also try to drive some solutions in the territory. And I think that's important, incredibly important. And we have to be clear that it's a matter of survival, right? So when we talk about climate change, and specifically in vulnerable territories that are much behind on urban infrastructure and access to basic rights and a structure to live with dignity. When we talk about these like being added with climate impacts, we are talking about survival. And so that's why it's important, obviously. And we we um, we have to address it in a way that considers and prioritize the people that live in the territory. That's also something that I wanted to bring here, because I think many times we when we are searching for solutions, right, as we don't have many representatives of vulnerable territories and vulnerable people in general in decision making, the search for solution ends up sometimes aggravating other issues and deepening inequalities. So in our project, something that we are doing is talking about uh, urban climate vulnerability by the people that are being affected first, right? And we can understand what we are already feeling in our daily lives. And by understanding more about climate, the climate crisis in general, also identifying the connections to other issues that are also challenges in our daily lives. So understanding how climate change is connected with hunger and the lack of sanitation, for example, that is present in our territory. So yeah, I just wanted to emphasize that we are talking about surviving. It's not okay that we lose our lives, we lose our houses, our communities, due to an issue that is being talked about 50 years now, that science has proved true, and we have to do something about that. So when we talk about adaptation in this context, in the context of vulnerable territories in cities, we are talking about survival.
Obrigado. Thank you for getting us off to a good start. So let's go from Brazil to India. Aditya, you want to go next?
Thank you. Well, climate change is intensifying, and we are seeing the results. Like it's the 7th of October, and it's still raining in Delhi. It's never happened in the
Uh,
past. So yes, so
so,
yes,
so,
we
the,
are
so the
in the right.
monsoon, so the monsoon has lasted much longer than is normal.
Yes, it has
Yeah.
lasted much longer, and it's also more intense. So,
Yeah.
so I think yeah, we are already seeing the impacts of climate change. But India is a big country with about a population of nearly 1.3 billion people. And another thing is that we also have a very young population. We have nearly 250 million kids in the schools and another 30 million in the higher education. So that's a lot of people and a lot of people. And then with climate intensifying, so this is one community we are trying to address because they are going to make a big difference in the coming times. They are going to become doctors, engineers, they're going to become politicians. They're also going to be also suffering from the worst impacts of climate change in the coming times. So what we are trying to do here is we are trying to build a program where it can sensitize these kids and this coming the young generation into doing something better. So our programs are centered around what are the biggest challenges we are facing in the country today. Our air quality is extremely bad, and the water crisis is deepening with every year. And of course, the quantity of waste which is being generated is again pretty high, and with biodiversity also taking a big hit. So in our Green Campus program, what we are trying to do is we are trying to address all these issues and trying to sensitize the younger generation that these are the things which are happening around you, make them understand it, and make it as part of their thinking processes, like basically build a emotional connect of, as well as the, you can say, a intellectual connect with what is happening around them. So that is the purpose for which our Green Campus program is working, so that these people, when they go out tomorrow, they are more responsible consumers. Because with the kind of population we are having, if we start having the consumption pattern of the past Western countries, then there's going to be mayhem, like there will be hardly any resources left. So that's what the Green Campus program is trying to work towards, make them more responsible and make them adjust to the coming crisis, which I think, Mr. God, you keep talking about. Yes, that is, we were thinking it will happen 40 years down, but it's happening right in our lifetime. It's happening now. So yes, it's become very important for us.
Well, thank you very much, and we'll come back to you in a moment. Matt, thanks for all that you have done when you were with Climate Reality. Welcome back. How would you answer this first question?
Thank you, sir, for the space and for having this conversation with us. Here in Colombia, as you know, it's an extremely vulnerable country to climate change, being one of the most biodiverse countries in the world, but also facing some of the worst effects of the climate crisis. This project started really back at the beginning of the pandemic in 2020. During the quarantine, we arranged for a government training program, and we were able to train more than 3,000 government officials on climate change here in Colombia. So it was a big program. Out of that training program, we actually won a grant from UK Pact, and that's one of the signature programs of the UK government. And now what we're doing is creating visions of decarbonization. So that means in 5 state governments, we have visions for how those states are going to decarbonize in energy and transport. And because of that amazing program, we're now developing narratives, and these narratives are working with journalists, with different communicators, with influencers to create new narratives on climate change. So I wanted to show you some of this work. These narratives are really beautiful.
Look at that.
I wanted to show you some of the examples that we're doing down here. And what we really want to do is work with municipalities. So what we have now is 115 prioritized municipalities. And we're working on projects in transport and energy, along with mayors, along with local governments. And we're financing those projects, working with banks and working with the private sector. And that's something that really is a big necessity here in Colombia. All of the resources that are arriving for climate change, unfortunately, sometimes don't have the projects that are already bankable and financeable. So what we're doing down here is really working with the mayors on those projects, creating projects that are already ready for finance from the private sector. So thank you so much, sir, for the space, and really appreciate this conversation.
Well, gracias a usted. Thank you so much. So let me go to the next question. We all know that the type of change you're working to create is no small task. It comes with challenges day in and day out. So I'd like to hear from each of you about what you see as the greatest challenge in transforming your communities to make them more inclusive, greener, and cleaner. But I don't just want to know what the challenge is. I'd like to hear how you're working to overcome that challenge. And Matt, we'll stay with you. Let's hear from you first on this one.
Sure. So the biggest challenge really in a country like Colombia has to do with international climate finance. So every year at the COP, there's always international agreements that send a lot of resources to the developing countries to work on climate change. Unfortunately, right now the resources are coming in really quickly, but the projects aren't developing as quickly as the finance is coming into the country. So that's the real area of necessity that we've identified. A lot of times, local governments don't have the capacity to build projects that the banks can finance. So we're really at that level, working on decarbonization fairs with the mayors, with the local governments. How do we partner banks and the private sector with public officials that maybe have a great idea for the municipality, but they don't have the capacity to develop a project that a bank would be interested in funding? So that's the number one problem that we're addressing right now in Colombia.
Okay, very, very good. Isadora, you want to go next?
Sure. So For us, I would say first I want to contextualize a little bit about the territory, because this is part of the challenge as well. When I say that uh, those are territories that are behind on urban infrastructure, it's because of very much of environmental racism, and so we get very few investment on a lot of basic infrastructure, and along with other issues such as Black youth genocide, food insecurity, and things like that. So one thing on drawing the ladder, building the climate rights ladder, was first to get the population involved. And when we are facing many different challenges, it's also hard to talk about climate change that sometimes can feel a little more distant than problems that are very urgent and more visible. Like when I'm thinking about what I'm going to eat for dinner, how can I think about the process of climate change? So one thing to overcome that was to connect those issues, right? So when we were talking to people and got together, we were talking about disconnections, right? And I think that was very important. It became very clear for us that, like, we can't separate environmental and social issues, but we need to talk about how things connect so people can relate to this problem, right? And another challenge, and that's like the second part, because first we are creating the ladder together, and the second part is to get support from decision makers and investment on actually making concrete some of the demands of the ladder. So we already understood what are the demands on the territory. We are proposing solutions, but we need support to make things happen. And I think that's also about valuing this knowledge, traditional knowledge and survival strategies that were built historically in face of many adversities. So I think valuing this knowledge and supporting those solutions, it's a way to overcome those great challenges.
Yeah, very good. Excellent, excellent. Aditya, would you go next?
So, what are some of the challenges we have faced trying to do these programs here? Is the biggest challenge we face is the mindset. People are not willing to connect it to the climate change. A lot of people, and especially we are talking to well-educated people who are running the institutions, even they are sometimes not able to connect the dots. And they generally, the concept in the mind is that it's basically disasters. Like, okay, it's a disaster, so you have to do some knee-jerk reaction to the disaster. So the thinking process is totally, you can say, reactive. It's not proactive. So that is one of the things, one of the biggest challenges which we face, that telling people how we can overcome this problem, and how the dots are connecting in behind, and how probably solving the climate crisis would be solving the energy crisis. So these type of thought processes, like talking to the institutions, becomes a slow process, and they start understanding. But now, fortunately, in the last few years, with us continuously working with them, and of course with the now a lot of support coming from the ecosystem, also people talking about climate change. So yes, now the people have started taking a note of it and started asking for solutions. So that's one big challenge we face. And the second challenge we are facing out here is regarding the finance part of it. Like, the solutions do have, like, naturally, putting on, if you want to put up solar panels, that costs money. And in going, you want to do rainwater harvesting, again, it costs money. And the problem with a lot of institutions is that they don't have that kind of capacity. They don't have the financial resources to go in for these solutions. So they are looking for either external funding, or they're looking for some aid. So that becomes a second big problem, that how, even if they are willing to do it, how do we do it? How do we take them to that last mile, even if they are interested in? So I would say mindset and finance, these are the two big challenges we are facing.
Yeah, thank you. Let me let me stay with you and ask you to start off on this next question as well, Aditya, because it's connected to what you've been talking about. Getting people to see the connection, connecting the dots. What about getting people to join your efforts? How have you, given these challenges, how have you mobilized people to take action in your community? If you would start us off on this one, Aditya, then I'll
Yeah,
call on the other two.
sure, sir. So in the past, like when we started facing this challenge about 7, 8 years back, and we were not going anywhere because of the size of population, and we were just not able to communicate in groups. So we thought that the best way would be, why don't we, to address the young population, why don't we train the teachers? Why don't we build inside the capacity inside the system? So that was the thought process. And like especially the schools and colleges are, you can find them literally in the villages of the country. So we started training teachers. So that was the first thing we did. And once we started training teachers, that was a good step, because we have done now about 11,000 teachers we have trained all over the country. And they were able to help build that mindset I've been talking about. They were able to educate people. They started understanding the crisis. They started connecting the dots, that this is why happening. It's why this problem is happening. So that was a big solution we took off, like by training the teachers and spreading the message in the community of educators. Now, the second thing we did was, we also did a lot of principals conclaves, because the leadership had to be involved in case some action had to be taken, and especially of the nature of turning of an institution green. So we started doing a couple of principals conclave in the large cities like Mumbai, Delhi, and Kolkata. Like these were the cities where we started targeting big cities. We started getting a lot of principals together, and then talking about climate change. And we'd use your presentation extensively in that, in training. So we started giving them presentations. We started training them on climate change, and that again helped. And finally, the one thing which really helped us in taking off was our climate reality leaders. They were absolutely like amazing. Like one of our biggest success story in Maharashtra is based on the work of our climate reality leaders, because they are the ones who were on the ground. They told us how to move forward. They gave us the local inputs. They even helped us in translating of material, like for example the communications material which we needed to translate in the local languages. So I think climate reality leaders were absolutely like you, I would say, a backbone of our program in the country. They've really helped us, and God bless them. I think if we can really, they can keep working at this, that will be great for us.
Oh, thank you so much, Isadora, and then Matt.
Yeah, so in order to engage people in our project, I think one very important thing was to know our audience and know, and this, since it's a community project, it meant also to know the territory, so we could invite people based on what they are interested in. For example, we are fortunate because in Maré there's already a lot of projects that are run by the people who live in the territory, and in many fronts like education, culture, and social and things like that. So not exactly climate. And again, as a follow-up of what I said earlier, I think this was part of the strategy to bring people to build the ladder with us, was to invite them based on what they are interested or worried, and showing like that the climate change could impact their activism. So if it was people that worked with gender violence, for example, or racial inequality, we invited them to talk about how climate change could impact Black populations or women and things like that. So I think that was like an important strategy for us, and also not being afraid to invite people. Sometimes we're like, I don't know if this person will be interested on that, but invite everybody, start calling people, see what works in your community as well. For us was putting there was like a car sound. I don't know how to call that, sorry. But there was a car that goes to the streets and calling people like, come meet in this date and time and build the climate rights ladder of Maré. Like, we don't know if any person that was just not knowing much about climate, was curious, and then could come. So yeah, don't be afraid to invite people. If you reach 130 come, like it's already a win. Yeah, I would say that.
Very, very good for you. Thank you. Matt?
Yeah, I would reiterate some of the comments that Aditya and Isadora have made, because the climate reality leaders have been fundamental here in Colombia to the success of the project. Really, since the Mexico training back in 2018, the Latin America branch has grown so much. We have, I think, about 6,000 climate reality leaders in Latin America now, which is a huge advance. And it's thanks to them that we've been able to open up so many doors and train so many government officials. This has really been a wave of change that I've seen firsthand here in Colombia, thanks to your leadership and thanks to all these climate reality leaders that are working hard every day to make the difference. For example, we've learned from other branches around the world. Aditya's teacher training program has had an influence here in Colombia. Even Amanda's youth leadership camp in Indonesia has had an impact here in Colombia. We did our first youth leadership camp a few weeks ago, training 30 young people from Colombia. And it was interesting because in that camp, part of the training, of course, was teaching them the presentation and how to give an effective presentation. But it's so much more impactful in nature than it is when students are, maybe trapped in a classroom. So that was one of the interesting lessons that we learned. Working closely with OPEPA, that you know well, is a local organization here in Colombia that has been working on environmental education now for 25 years. So working hand in hand with that kind of organization that understands the importance of connecting youth with nature, especially as this world becomes more urbanized and youth are less connected with those experiences in nature, that's been a really fundamental aspect of the project so far. So how do we get youth back out into nature, connecting with nature and building those connections?
Yeah, great. Wonderful. Wonderful. Now, with people tuning in from all over the world, I'd like to ask each of you if you would share some advice. Specifically, what would you tell someone who wants to get involved in this work but might not know where to begin? Isadora, would you lead us off on this one? What are your suggestions?
So I actually love to reflect on that. And I think for me, a great message would be for us to shift internally and understand that we are an important part of our community. So when we are talking about building green communities, I think it's very important that each of us understand that we are an important part of this community, of building this community, because I think many times we feel powerless when we're talking about climate change. I think there's a lot of these feelings, at least in my circle and conversation, right? Times when we feel powerless. So when we look at a smaller level in your neighborhood, even in your street, understand that you are an important part of that community and you can start there, and find people that are worried about the issue as you are, or wants to do something about it. Talking a little bit about the climate reality leaders, as Aditya and Matt said in the last part, I think that's the great power. And what I see a lot in this network here in Brazil, the feeling of like, I'm not alone. There's other people that are worried about that are doing something about that. So I think we can find a lot of strength in that. So yeah, I would say know that you're an important part, be an active citizen, and find people to support you on this path.
Yeah, well, wonderful. Aditya, you want to go next?
The advice I would like to give to people who are watching this program, in case you're a climate leader, or if you are a person, like, of course, most of us have gone through our schools or institutions. So we all have our circles of influence. So probably in case you are in touch with one of the institutions around you, please get in touch with them. Tell them about what is the Green Campus program like, what benefits it can get, and connect them to us. We have a website, or with this after this programming, with our call to action, you can just go for it and you can just connect us and we will take it from there. And secondly, in case if some educators are watching this program today, then I'll definitely request them that you are part of the system. Please have a look at the benefits, like what you will get, whether it's in terms of energy, clean energy, whether in terms of biodiversity, water, about your waste management, about the air quality in the school. There'll be a lot of immediate benefits, and especially after COVID, we are also so much bothered about the health implications moving forward. So in case if a green campus program gets implemented, we will have both the benefits. You will have a better surroundings, you will have a better environment for the kids to study, and the benefits can be seen very fast, like in within 6 months things get clear. So we'll really request them to come forward and connect with us.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Matt.
Yeah, I would agree that the connections that you make can really last a lifetime. And I think that it's about reaching out, finding like minded people, and building a community with them. The climate reality presentation is a tool that you developed over the years, and that is constantly surprising people, constantly influencing people, constantly changing hearts and minds. And that's something that we're seeing here in Colombia because of the presentation and because of the climate reality trainings. This new core of climate reality leaders, it has its effect, opened up new opportunities, working with local government officials, deploying millions of dollars in renewable energy. The advice that I would give to someone is reach out, give the presentation, even if it's 10 minutes. It's a tool that's there and it's available for anybody to use. And don't underestimate the power that it has, because I've seen it firsthand.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I'm so glad to hear that. And I want to stay with you for this final question that I have, and then I'm going to turn it back over to Aaron. How does storytelling play a role in your work? Have you found any specific techniques that help encourage others to become a part of your work? Matt, lead us off, and then we'll go to your colleagues.
It's such a great question. This work that we're doing on narratives has been so influential, for not just for children and youth, but also for women, for marginalized communities, for indigenous communities, for Afro-Colombian communities. Because historically, Colombia is a country that's gone through decades of conflict. It has a complicated history, a dark past, and it's not easy to just one day snap out of it and build a new future. A lot of that has to do with changing the narratives in society. That's something that we're trying to do in this project. We really want to create a new optimism and a new hope that we can work together and we can break away from conflict and work hand in hand, because the common narrative here is that there's too much corruption to get anything done, right? But if we stay with that narrative and we don't trust a little bit more in the community and in the decision makers in this country, we can't expect anything to change, right? We have to kind of break that narrative in order to generate new changes. So that's been the kind of the mentality we've had in the project so far, and it's working. It's a long-term process, but we're making progress.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you so much. Isadora, Aditya?
So for me, I love what Matt says. I think it's a lot about shifting the narrative, and for us, this storytelling was very much used on exchanging, or inviting people to exchange about what are the challenges that they face on, with climate impacts, and also what are the strategies that they are using. And I think one important part of this was, to really encourage people and value what they are bringing to the table, because a lot of times this empiric knowledge of, like, this is my experience, is not valued, and people feel a little insecure of sharing things like, I don't know much about climate change because I didn't study that, like, formally. So I think one important part was like value. No, you can tell me, like, you are the best person in the world to talk about your reality, right? And you can understand, like, that, oh, this street, when there's heavy rain, this street floods and this doesn't, and oh, this, understand your territory, know your territory, and this is important. This is knowledge, right? And this is important to build, like, public policy and to improve your neighborhood. So I think just, letting people know that what they are bringing, their experience, their knowledge, is important and is worth sharing.
Yeah, wonderful. Aditya?
Yes, so storytelling is an important part of
Yeah.
the solutions which we are giving, because the young audience which we are talking to, and sometimes the climate change, the science part of it becomes difficult for them to understand, and especially some of the people, they get very much challenged when you start talking about greenhouse gases and you start getting into depth of it. But once you start talking about storytelling, when you tell it in a story format, a lot of people, they catch on to it. It's easier for them to understand. And surprisingly, I still get a lot of demand for your this movie, The Inconvenient Truth. Still, it's in big demand out here. People like to listen to it and hear it. So that you can see the power of storytelling is definitely there, and we are trying to therefore develop some content, which is in the local languages. We are developing content. We are developing stories, and the stories which are more powerful if they are regional, if they are from the local incidents. Like, for example, if you're telling in a particular state and the regional area, you tell them some story that what happened, why did the climate change happen, what are the possible solutions, how the neighbor is doing it. That really has a big implication. Like we've been finding, once we start telling these stories in regional languages and the solutions which are happening in the next district, we've always seen that the institutions really come forward, and they also want to join the bandwagon. So I think storytelling is a very, very powerful tool. I personally feel it's a very powerful tool, and we are using it quite extensively.
Wonderful. Thank you. And thank you all so much for an inspiring conversation. I know we've got a lot of questions that are coming in from our audience. So I'll return at the end of this, but I'm going to turn it back over to you, Aaron, to pose some of the audience questions to our panel.
Great. Thank you so much, all of you, for such an amazing discussion. I wish we could keep talking, and we will. We have some great questions from the audience. So we're going to open things up here. The first question I have is, this understanding that political support is a really important factor to building green communities. So I'll start with, I guess, Aditya, I'll start with you, but how do you all think that cities and towns can support consumers and small businesses so that they can develop green and sustainable communities? What kind of incentives can they provide to kind of get this going in their own communities? So, Aditya, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, political support is extremely necessary, and that's the reason actually we have to talk to a lot of policymakers, and we have to talk to them, and the conversation has to be going, because the resources, sometimes they command a lot of resources, and a lot of the, you can say, with the resources available, a lot of these solutions can be implemented. And especially the government departments who are controlling most of the, like the municipalities, they're controlling a lot of educational institutions are with the government. So all these people, when they are having when we have the correct policies, like for example, currently in our country, there's a lot of emphasis being given on smart cities. So thanks to that smart cities emphasis by the government, which is coming right from the top, a lot of cities have started competing with each other for getting the first position and the second position, and it's supposed to be very prestigious. So that is something, I think, if in case if we are able to get this type of a healthy competition, like coming from the political class, and they are motivating the government machinery, and then of course the public gets involved, it can have some good impact in the coming times.
Thank you so much. Yes, I totally agree. Matt, what about you? What do you think cities can do to help?
It's a great question, Aaron. So the municipalities that we have in our project right now, there's about 115 municipalities. Among them, there are some small cities. Most of them are small municipalities. But I think it's an important part of the equation because, at least here in Colombia, there's such a high rate of urbanization that we can't leave the small towns or small cities behind and just thinking about the big cities, right? We have to keep them in mind, especially when it comes to emissions and greenhouse gases. That here, the cities are huge emitters of greenhouse gases, right? But in a country like Colombia that faces high rates of deforestation, we also have to remember that a lot of deforestation is happening around small municipalities and small towns. So how can we work with those local governments and municipalities to create changes in deforestation? So in other words, how do we generate new livelihoods in those municipalities? Maybe it can be products from the Amazon, like cacao, like acai, different products that might give them an alternative to livestock and other sources of deforestation. So we're working with those municipalities, principally in energy and transport, but also those municipalities that have high rates of deforestation, of how do we solve that problem, working hand in hand with those mayors.
Terrific. That's a lot of municipalities that you have involved already. That's awesome. Isadora, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that's very important. One thing that we learned as well when we were building the letter is that a lot of when we're talking about the problems and solutions, uh, we feel like we wanted to know more about the issue. So I think one thing that is very important and it's like a first step, let's say, is doing the diagnosis, right? Understanding, like mapping the climate vulnerability of the cities and driving adaptation plans or resilience plans for the cities. I think it's like a very urgent matter for all the cities in Brazil. And we actually have this call to action for climate reality leaders, for them to understand and to research if their cities has a map on climate vulnerability or an adaptation plan. And I think we have to start there. We have to start understanding what are the problems and then pushing for policies and to build green communities. Yeah.
Terrific. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you got to know what you have before you can start to build something new, right? Um, so I'm going to actually ask you all as part of this, since our 24 hours this year is Spotlight on Solutions and Hope. I want to kind of end on a hopeful, really hopeful note, and that is asking each of you kind of what gives you hope. What do you how do you support yourselves in this work that you do and continue to do, and the fight that you continue to engage in and bring others into, and what gives you hope that we can solve the crisis together? So I will start with Isadora. What gives you hope?
People. People that against all odds are worried and are donating their time, their energy to fight this problem that sometimes and a lot of times they were not even responsible for, but they are there and they don't give up. And I think we find the strength on each other.
Terrific. Yeah, we do have each other, and we have to. We all have to be in this fight together. Matt, what gives you hope?
Yeah, for the same. Like to see changes happening so quickly in such a short amount of time is something that we've all seen in the presentations of climate reality. But when you see it firsthand and you see change happening so quickly, that's something that really generates hope. Even just the last couple of years since the pandemic, Colombia is a country that's changing so quickly. To give you an example, we went to the Congress of Municipalities, where most of the mayors of Colombia attend every year. It's a conference. We did surveys back before the pandemic, and the level of knowledge about climate change was a little bit low. But we went back this year after the pandemic, and there's a significant increase in just basic knowledge on the climate crisis, which for us is really good news. That just means that the level of knowledge is increasing every year. And then working with young people, because that camp that I mentioned, there's 30 kids coming from zones of conflict. A lot of them have seen family members, community members that have been killed over the years of conflict in Colombia. And to give them a chance to come learn about climate change, become leaders in their community. You know, we met with them at the end of the camp and we were all in tears to see the effect that it had on their lives, and just having that experience in nature and meeting people that care about them and want to generate their skills and leadership. That's something that generates hope, because we know that they're going to go back into their communities and be the next generation of leadership that this planet needs. That would be my answer.
Thank you, Matt. And Aditya, what gives you hope?
What gives me hope is, well, I work with a lot with young people and they're always very hopeful. So yeah, so that's definitely gives me a lot of hope. And one more thing, like for example, seeing the COVID, like the when it happened, and everybody was, I was talking to so many people, they said it's the probably end of the world, probably nothing's going to come out. And within a year's time, we have been able to solve the issue of COVID. Like we have a vaccine and everybody's back to normal. So I think the climate challenge, if I think we will put our minds together once, because now I see in the last 3-4 years, the number of hackathons I'm seeing in the country like happening, like we get invite for literally every month that please can Climate Reality Network join this hackathon we are having in this city or that city. So a lot of now young people are getting involved, and now a lot of brains are now getting involved with the solutions part of it. They started talking about various aspects of the problem, because now they also know that it's not a problem of only one aspect. It's a developmental issue. So we are seeing a lot of now people working on the solution part of it, and I'm very sure that because we work with young people and you see the kind of energy they exude, that they want to find a solution to these problems. So that gives us a lot of hope that probably we are on the right tracks.
Well, thank you, all of you. You give me hope, and I'm so I feel so privileged to be a part of this panel today. So thank you all for joining us from all around the world. Keep up the good work, and I think this is unfortunately all we have time for today. But before we go, I want to thank again all of you and thank Mr. Gore for participating in this dialogue. And I also want to thank all of you who are joining us and being a part of this important conversation. Um, to learn more about climate solutions like we've talked about today, you can find more stories of people just like you and just like all of our panelists and activists who participated today in the dialogues on our website at 24hoursofreality.org. So please go there. We have videos from around the world of activists taking action right now. And hopefully you'll find those inspirational and give you some ideas for things you can do at home. We will also be posting these dialogues next week. They have been recorded in 6 different languages. So all 4 dialogues will be on the 24hoursofreality.org website starting on Tuesday. So please feel free to come back there to share those with people in your community so they can watch these dialogues. And then lastly, I want to welcome back Mr. Gore just to close our dialogues for today. Thank you all.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Erin, and thank you to the members of this last panel as well. I too got a lot of hope out of that conversation, and this concludes today's conversations. We've heard from climate leaders all around the world who are now advancing a just transition, implementing natural climate solutions, fighting for zero-emission transportation, and building inclusive green communities. So I'd like to thank all of you for joining us, and I'd like to particularly thank the speakers who participated in our 4 dialogues today. You are truly an inspiration to us all in taking action and developing real solutions to the climate crisis right where we live. As Erin said, if you missed any of today's dialogues, please visit 24hoursofreality.org in the coming days to hear from these inspirational leaders who've shared their experiences and thoughts and inspiration with us. Every year with 24 Hours of Reality, we focus on an area that we view as of utmost importance to the climate movement. Now more than ever, we need hope and we need solutions. We know that the actions we take in this decade will determine whether or not we're able to avoid the worst impacts of the climate crisis. We can, we must, I'm convinced we will, because we have available to us right now all of the solutions we need to cut emissions by 50% in the next 8 years. In order to get to a net zero by 2050, we can solve this crisis. We're beginning to move now, but it will take bold action from world leaders and from community leaders and activists like you, and from those we have heard from today. So I encourage all of you to take what you have learned today, reach out to your local climate reality chapters and branches, and see what you can do in your own communities. You can visit climatereality.org to find the network closest to you. And together, I know that we can, we must, we will, and we are now beginning to solve the climate crisis. So always remember, political will is in fact a renewable resource. Thank you so much, and see you soon. Thank you.